There is a couple down the street from where I grew up, married for 34 years. Every morning, the husband brings out 2 cups of coffee, sets one on the porch railing without saying a word, and goes back inside. His wife comes out 3 minutes later, picks it up, sits down. They don't talk always, sometimes they just sit there. In this quiet that doesn't feel empty, it feels like something else entirely. I used to think that was love. I was wrong, or rather, I was only half right. Here's what nobody tells you about long relationships. Love is the spark, but it's never the architecture. Love is what brings two people together, but something completely different is what keeps them. And that's something. Most people never name it, they just feel it, or they don't, and they spend decades wondering why. The most persistent myth in modern relationship is that if you stay together long enough, it means the love never died. But research in relationship psychology tells a very different story. After the first 2 to 3 years, the neurochemical cocktail responsible for romantic love, dopamine surges, oxytocin flooding, norepinephrine making your hands shake when they walk in, begins to quiet down, not disappear, quiet. And what's left after the noise fades is not nothing, it's everything. Dr. John Gottman spent over 4 decades studying couples, thousands of them. He could watch a couple interact for just minutes and predict with over 90% accuracy whether they would divorce. But what fascinated him most wasn't conflict. It was something he called bids for connection. Small, almost invisible moments where one person reaches out. Not dramatically, not romantically, just humanly. A glance, a comment about bird outside the window, a sigh. And the other person either turns toward that bed or they don't. Couples who stayed together weren't necessarily more passionate, they weren't more compatible on paper. They were more responsive, not to grand gestures, to small ones. That's when it starts to click, because you have seen this, you have lived it. You know the relationship that looked perfect from outside and collapsed quietly. You know the couple who fought constantly but somehow never actually left. And you couldn't explain it, neither could they. What you were watching was something psychology calls functional attachment, the slow, largely unconscious process where two people stop being two separate worlds and begin to share one nervous system. This is not a metaphor. When someone you've loved for decades walks into a room, your cortisol levels shift, your breathing regulates. The research on this is almost uncomfortable to read because it reveals something that most people find either beautiful or terrifying. Long-term partners become biological regulators for each other. You are quite literally part of how the other person's body manages stress. This is why the death of a long-term partner doesn't just cause grief, it causes physical dysregulation. Sleep deteriorates, immune function drops, the body doesn't know how to be calm alone anymore. Not because it's weak, because it adapted. It learned that this person means safety. That's not love in the romantic sense. That's something older, something more primal. It's the same attachment system that kept us alive in tribes for 100,000 years. But here's what makes this genuinely complicated. Because we live in an era that worships romantic love. Movies, songs, the entire architecture of modern dating culture tells you that if the butterflies are gone, something is wrong. That comfort is settling. That familiarity is the enemy of passion. So millions of people abandon relationship not because they're broken, but because they're matured. They mistake depth for distance. There's a concept in philosophy called amor fati, the love of one's fate, not loving things because they're perfect, but loving them because they are yours. Nietzsche wrote about it, Stoics lived by it, and somewhere in long relationships, something similar quietly happens. The couple stops asking if this is the right person and starts building something with the person who is here. That shift from evaluating to creating is where most lasting relationships actually begin. And yet, it would be dishonest to make this sound entirely beautiful because some couples stay together for 30, 40, 50 years out of fear. Not love, not attachment, Not even habit in the healthy sense, but because the world outside feels unlivable. Because identity has collapsed so truly into the relationship that leaving would mean not just losing someone, but losing yourself entirely. That kind of relationship is not a success story. It's a very quiet tragedy wearing the costume of one. So, how do you tell the difference? Here's the thing that research and lived experience both seem to agree on. Relationships build on a fear contract. They shrink both people. They create silence that isn't peaceful. It's heavy. The two people inside them become smaller over decades, not larger. But relationships built on genuine attachment, on responsive presence, on what Gottman called knowing your partner's inner world, those expand. The people inside them develop in the ways they couldn't alone. They become more fully themselves, not less. The relationship doesn't complete them, it amplifies them. That couple with the morning coffee, I understand them now in a way I didn't at 15. What they've built isn't romance. It's something harder to find and almost impossible to fake. It's the accumulated weight of 10,000 small choices to show up, to respond, to stay curious about a person long after the mystery was supposed to run out. Love gets you to the door, but what keeps you inside? What turns a relationship into a life? That's not a feeling you fall into. It's something you built in the quiet, unremarkable, irreplaceable moments that most people scroll right past. The coffee on the railing, the 3 minutes of waiting, the silence that needs nothing to add to it. That's not love fading. That's love finishing its first sentence and finally beginning to speak.